Picture this. You are standing at the end of a long, cold road. For 55 years, this road was your entire world. A life of quiet duty, of hollow grandeur. A gilded cage you shared with a man whose name you wore, but whose heart you never knew. Now he is gone. The cage door is open. In your hand, trembling slightly with the unfamiliar weight of choice, is a letter. The paper is old, the ink faded, but the words are a fire in the winter of your soul. It is from him, the boy you loved, the man you lost. It holds a simple address, nestled in a mountain range you've only seen in pictures, and a single, earth-shattering question. Are you free? For Alara, that question was not a choice, but a reckoning. At 77, her hair was the color of sea foam and her hands were etched with the fine lines of a life lived for others. She stood in the marble hallway of the mansion that had been her home, her prison, since she was a girl of 22. Her husband, Mayor Harrison Thorne Jr., had been buried 2 days prior, laid to rest with the same cold ceremonial pomp with which he had lived his life. Her children, Bartholomew and Catherine, were pale and ambitious echoes of their father. They had already spoken to her of legacy, of appearances, of her dignified role as the grieving matriarch of the Thorne dynasty. They saw her not as a person, but as a monument to their father's memory, a relic to be polished and displayed. But the letter in her pocket burned. Her mind cast back across the chasm of 5.5 decades, to a time when her world was not marble and obligation, but sun-drenched fields and the call of a meadowlark. She was a girl then, with hair like spun gold and a laugh that could chase the clouds away. And there was Silas. He was a farmhand, his shoulders broad from his work, his hands calloused but gentle. His eyes were the color of the deep woods, and in them she saw a future. A small, simple, brilliant thing filled with a love that felt as real and solid as the earth beneath their feet. They planned to run away. They had a spot picked out, a little cabin by a creek where no one would find them. They had a promise, sealed not with a ring, but with a shared dream whispered under a blanket of stars. But their dream was a fragile wildflower in the path of a ruthless machine. Her father, a good man broken by debt, was beholden to the town's most powerful man, Mayor Harrison Thorne Sr., a brute who wore a suit and tie like armor. Thorne Sr. ruled the town with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove of legal manipulation. He saw Alara's beauty and her family's desperation, and he saw a transaction. He didn't want money. He wanted to bind her family to his. He demanded Alara marry his son, Harrison Jr., a young man who already possessed his father's chilling ambition and dismissive cruelty. It was a merger of families, a consolidation of power. Her father, his spirit crushed, agreed. He called it survival. Alara called it a death sentence. The night they were meant to leave, Alara waited for Silas by the old oak tree at the edge of town, a small bag clutched in her hands. He never came. Instead, 2 of Thorne's men appeared out of the twilight. Their faces were grim. "He's not coming," one of them said, his voice devoid of pity. "Got cold feet." Ran off. They took her back to her father's house, where the deal was sealed. Days later, she was married. At the ceremony, she scanned the crowd, a desperate, silent prayer on her lips. But Silas was not there. She believed their lie. She believed he had abandoned her. And with that belief, a part of her soul turned to desert, a barren landscape where nothing would ever grow again. She performed her duties as Mrs. Harrison Thorne Jr. with flawless, robotic grace. She raised her children. She hosted dinners. She smiled when she was told to smile. For 55 years, she was the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect lie. Now, standing in the cold hallway, she felt the ghost of that girl from long ago rise within her. The letter was proof. He hadn't run. He had waited. The question burned through the paper. "Are you free?" Alara looked at her reflection in the polished marble floor. A stranger stared back, a woman sculpted by grief and obligation. Slowly, deliberately, she reached up and unclasped the heavy pearl necklace from around her neck, an anniversary gift from a husband who never saw her. She laid it on the mahogany table. It was a shackle she would no longer wear, She went to her room, not the Grand Master suite, but the small guest room she had occupied for the last 20 years. She packed a single bag, not with designer clothes, but with a few simple dresses, a warm shawl, and a faded photograph of her parents. She walked out of the front door, not looking back at the house built on her silent sacrifice. She left a note for her children, its words simple and final. I have gone to live. The journey was a baptism. A bus ride through sprawling suburbs gave way to another through rolling farm country, each mile a thread being pulled from the suffocating tapestry of her old life. Finally, a third bus groaned its way up a winding mountain road, into a landscape so rugged and beautiful it made her heart ache. The town was little more than a main street and a handful of houses clinging to the mountainside. Following the letter's directions, she walked a dirt path that led away from the town, deeper into the woods. The air grew crisp, smelling of pine and damp earth. And then she saw it. A small cabin, built of sturdy, weathered logs, a curl of smoke rising from its stone chimney. It was exactly as she and Silas had described in their dreams all those years ago. It was a sanctuary. And on the porch, a man was sitting in a rocking chair, sanding a piece of wood. He was older, his hair a shock of white against his weathered skin. Time had carved new lines onto his face, but his shoulders were still broad, his posture still solid. A long, thin scar ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth, a permanent, pale reminder of a violence she never knew he had suffered. He looked up as she approached, and his hands stilled. His eyes, they were the same, the color of the deep woods, and in them she saw it. 55 years of waiting. He didn't rush to her. He simply stood, his expression a mixture of awe and a sorrow so profound it stole her breath. Alara? He whispered, her name a prayer he hadn't spoken aloud in half a century. Silas? She breathed, and the sound of his name on her own lips was a homecoming. There was no passionate embrace, no cinematic reunion. It was quieter, more sacred than that. It was two souls, long separated by a cruel tide, finally finding the same shore. He led her inside. The cabin was simple, clean, and filled with the scent of sawdust and wood smoke. Everywhere she looked, there were carvings. Birds with wings outstretched, graceful deer, howling wolves. Life captured in wood. On the mantelpiece, above a crackling fire, sat a small, intricately carved meadowlark, its wood polished smooth by the touch of hands over many, many years. I made this for you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. For the night we were supposed to leave. He told her the truth of that night. Thorne's men had found him not long after he left his family's farm. They hadn't just warned him off. They had beaten him, breaking his ribs and his jaw, leaving him for dead in a ditch. They told me if I ever came near you again, they would finish the job, he said, his hand unconsciously tracing the scar on his face. They told me you'd gone with Thorne's son willingly, that you chose that life for years. He had believed it, his heart broken not just by her loss, but by the thought of her betrayal. It wasn't until he read of Thorne Senior's death years later that a sliver of doubt crept in. He started to wonder. He had spent his life here, alone, pouring his love and his loss into his carvings, never marrying, never loving another. He had sent the letter on a whim, a final, desperate cast of a line into the past, never truly expecting an answer. Their days fell into a gentle, healing rhythm. It was a slow, careful rediscovery of one another. She told him of her life, of the suffocating opulence, the emotional desert of her marriage, of her children who were strangers to her. He listened, his silence a comforting balm on her old wounds. He taught her the names of the mountain flowers. She helped him cook simple meals over the fire. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch, not always talking, content to share the silence as the sun bled across the sky, painting the peaks in hues of orange and purple. The cabin was more than a shelter. It was a testament to a love that had refused to die. Here, Silas was not just a man. He was her protector, shielding her from the ghosts that had haunted her for a lifetime. The wasteland in her soul began to feel the first drops of a gentle rain. The peace was a fragile bubble, destined to be broken. Her son, Bartholomew Thorne, was a man forged in his father's image, a predator who saw the world in terms of assets and liabilities. His mother's disappearance was not a personal tragedy. It was a public relations crisis. It was an embarrassment that threatened his campaign for the very mayoral seat his father and grandfather had held. A runaway matriarch did not fit the narrative of stable, dynastic power he was selling to the public. He viewed her as his father's most prized possession, and her departure was an act of theft against the family legacy. Using his vast resources, he tracked her. The arrival of his gleaming black car, a monstrous, silent beast crawling up the dusty mountain path, was an omen. It was the sterile, heartless world she had fled, come to reclaim her. Bartholomew stepped out of the car, his expensive suit an insult to the rustic tranquility of the forest. He did not ask if she was well. He did not ask if she was happy. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Mother," he said, his voice sharp and accusatory, "this foolishness ends now. You are making a spectacle of yourself and of this family's name." He stormed onto the porch, his eyes sweeping over Silas with unconcealed disdain, dismissing him as nothing more than a piece of rustic scenery. "You will come home. We will tell the press you were at a private retreat, recovering from your grief." He spoke not to her, but at her, his words dripping with the chilling language of control. When she refused, his tone hardened. He threatened her, speaking of declaring her mentally incompetent, of using the law to force her back under his authority. "You are a thorn," he hissed. "You belong to his memory. You will not tarnish it with this pathetic fantasy." He then turned on Silas, his voice laced with venom. "And you penniless old hermit, I will ruin you. I will find a zoning violation, an unpaid tax from 50 years ago. I will have this shack condemned and your land seized. You will have nothing." The past was not just repeating. It was screaming. Another powerful, corrupt thorn man, trying to destroy Silas to possess Alara. But this was not 55 years ago. Silas was not a boy anymore. He was a mountain, weathered and immovable. He stepped forward, placing himself between Bartholomew and Alara. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His quiet strength was more formidable than all of Bartholomew's blustering rage. "She is not property," Silas said, his voice low and steady as granite. "She is a free woman. You will not touch her." For the first time in 55 years, the fear that had been Alara's constant companion dissolved. In its place, a fierce, protective fire ignited. The silent, submissive woman she had been forced to become was burned away in that flame, revealing the strong, resilient girl who had waited by the oak tree all those years ago. She stepped out from behind Silas, her small frame radiating a power that stunned her son into silence. "No," she said, her voice clear and ringing with an authority he had never heard from her. "I am not a thorn. That was a name I wore like a costume in a play that ran for far too long. My life with your father was a duty, not a joy, a service, not a marriage." She gestured to the simple cabin around them. "This place, these humble wooden walls, hold more love than that cold mansion ever did. This man has shown me more kindness in a few weeks than your father showed me in a lifetime." She looked her son directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "I am not going back. I am home." Just as Bartholomew's face contorted with rage, ready to escalate his threats, a young couple appeared at the edge of the clearing. It was Liam, the town's blacksmith, and his wife, Sarah, a teacher at the small school. They had befriended the quiet, solitary woodcarver over the years, often bringing him supplies and listening to his stories. They had heard the angry shouts and the unfamiliar engine. They walked calmly to the porch and stood beside Silas and Alara. They said nothing, but their presence was a silent, powerful declaration. They were the community. They were decency. They were the found family that money could not buy and power could not break. Bartholomew looked from his mother's defiant face to Silas's quiet strength, to the unwavering loyalty in the eyes of the young couple. He was outnumbered not by force, but by a kind of integrity he could not comprehend. His power, so absolute in the city, was useless here. He sputtered a final empty threat, then retreated to his black car. A defeated king banished from a kingdom he never knew existed. He sped away, leaving only a cloud of dust and the blessed silence of the mountains. The bubble of peace had been tested, and it had held. What is a life? Is it measured in the number of years we spend breathing, or in the moments that take our breath away? Is it the grand house we live in, or the home we build in another's heart? How long would you wait for a love you thought was lost? Alara and Silas waited 55 years, not because they had to, but because some promises are not carved into stone, but into the very soul. Standing on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky, Alara reached out and took Silas's hand. Their time together might be measured in seasons, not decades, but it would be theirs. It would be real, and it was more than enough. If their story of enduring love and second chances touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. We want to hear what it means to you. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us it's never, ever too late to find your way home.